Kia ora. Good evening. Welcome to Code 9 New Zealand. And tonight we have a special guest, Vic Perdana. How are you?
Good, man. How are you?
Doing well. Yeah, excited for your session. We had initially booked that a few months ago, but now we finally got you. Yeah, I'm excited because everything is about everywhere. You just heard about AI, and now we have agents. You're bringing this semantic kernel, build a personalized assistant. What you're trying to bring to us tonight?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Marcel. So for your audience, I guess you heard a lot about agents and AI, and they kind of interchangeably being used. So what I aim to do today is to hopefully give you a more practical and hands-on sort of guidance on how that can be applied in a simply kind of a very simple application, and how you can infuse some of those term into into that application. So I would like to kind of doing more showing rather than telling. In this case, obviously, this is a community event, so the more interactivity, the better. So we wanted to get more people to hopefully interact and ask any questions. And if there's any bugs in the demo, let's so be it. We'll learn together. Hopefully, we can share the wisdom.
Cool. Yeah, excited for that. I like demos. We're gonna take a few minutes onto that. But before we get to that, Vic, let just me introduce the user group. So Code Night New Zealand. And we're a community group of developers. We love coding and we follow best practices on software development languages and technologies. You're going to see that in our sessions, we always focus a little bit more on the Microsoft stack. However, we are always open to all technologies. And we have a purpose, or the intent of the user group, to enable developers with practical knowledge to excel and launch their careers. So we're always going to find good contents, great content, from comprising different levels, like introduction to advanced, in between. So yeah, you're always going to get good value out of our sessions. I'd like to mention that we are part of AzureTire.com. So we're a cloud native group of enthusiasts, and we get to share about the latest and greatest in the cloud native space. Also sponsored by .NETFoundation.org. So they are the entity that look after the different open source .NET projects and JetBrains software tooling for developers. With no further ado, let me just bring your screen.
Sure. Sounds good.
And the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, mate. I appreciate it. And again, I like to make it sort of interactive. So if you have any questions, if there's any questions from the audience as well, Marcel, please feel free to stop me as we go along.
Correct.
So this is from the community to the community. So love to share. And also, I'm still learning in this space, and mostly everyone is, because the rapid development of AI has been, tremendous and very. Very, very fast. Things could change, in 24 hours, 48 hours, when OpenAI or some company, Anthropic, whatever, announce new thing. So we all in this together. So yeah, so what I'm going to do, so I'm not going to sort of debrief everything that I did in Reactor. So you've probably saw my previous session in Reactor about, how you build personalized agent. But I just want to touch base a little bit on kind of the important aspects of that, and particularly as it relates to, building agent. What is my learning? What is, the key points that I wanted to highlight in my journey as I learned about building this personalized agent that helps my day-to-day life. my day activities at work, as well as touch base on kind of the new things, similar to kind of the theme at Build is basically bringing AI to the mass. And you've probably heard about natural web, NL web. Obviously, that's going to be something that will be quite popular. Depending on obviously the adoption of of websites and so on.
Mm-hmm.
Within that, there is a little sort of nugget that we already heard a lot, which is called MCP, or Model Context Protocol. So I'm going to touch base on that, on particularly at the practical level, on how you actually can take advantage of MCP in your application, and potentially expanding it to integrating other systems, right? So that's basically what I'm going to do. So just without further ado, just a bit introduction of myself. So let me just move on to the next slide. So yeah, so I work day to day as ISV partner solution architect, or app dev architect in the Asia team. I helped launch the APAC Semantic Kernel office hours before GA, so that was about 2 to 3 years ago. I work with community quite a bit on various initiatives like startups and tech and employability at local office in Melbourne. And yeah, I worked kind of help as much as I can in the community around the open source project and so on. So yeah, I'm keen to continue collaborating with everyone here as I sort of share more stuff, as I also learn and hopefully can contribute back. So again, these are all about demystifying. You probably heard at Build, right? Demystifying some of the buzz called Agentic AI. You probably heard of that many times in various articles, various blogs, or videos and so on. But I wanted to take it and ground us into kind of what it means at a practical level, I said. And also touch base, not only large language models, but also, talk about local models and where they can excel. And in my experience, how I use that. Local models, edge models at edge. You probably heard, you mentioned before we come on, Foundries just came out with the edge offering as well. That can host your models at the edge. So that's going to be exciting. And then one of the things that I more recently get involved in is a bunch of scenarios from my partners, my ISVs, that talk about, hey, how can I build some sort of guardrails into my implementation of AI system? Because as you know, AI, or in Gen AI and LLM, they are probabilistic algorithms, right? So there's basically you try to guess the next word from various complex sort of neural algorithm. And what most of my sort of engagements kind of asking is around how you build that rigor, how you build some sort of guardrails. So whether that's process that you want to build and infuse into your agents, or it could be some on top of system prompt that we can do. There's this bunch of stuff that we want to do around making our assistant, we call it stateful, right? So that you can manage the state as you go along, as you would if you go to ChatGPT or Copilot. You can see that it tracks the conversation, and then it kind of know where you add what sort of context that you have. So yeah, that's basically what I'm going to talk about in these hopefully 30 minutes or so. And I want to skip some of this stuff. I don't need to kind of go through the whys. We've already talked about that, how important it is to move into to leverage and start adopting agentic AI in your application. and what it's all about. So having all those three major sort of characteristics of agentic AI is that it can reason over reasonably complex business process or even more complex business process, have understanding of the context, and being able to interact with the real world. So there's kind of three tenets of agentic AI. So you can plan, adapt to new information based on the context that you give to the agent. So it's more than just a stateless kind of, hey, I need this, please, and then give me something. So response in, response out. It's more than that. It is now able to understand weather, or understand or try to get the latest information on the soccer team score overnight, and so on. So you can do all that with agentic AI. So that's the idea there. And obviously the challenge, as we talked about, that more advanced scenarios around maintaining stateful, a state within a set of process or a set of steps is important. So if you want to build an agent that does, help desk, for example, if you want to agent that guides your customers to purchase a car or purchase a TV, whatever it is, right? You want to put some guardrails around what it can do, and also move to the next step. After you put in the customer details, you ask for a payment, for example, and then execute the order. And there's a lot of I guess predictability needed within that. You can't suddenly go to you use Stripe for your payment. You might want to use different one during the runtime. You don't want to do that, right? So you want to limit that scope of agent when processing payment, for example. And there's a interesting announcement at Build around there's going to be tons and tons of agents. People are going to be building agents we have our low-code solution like Copilot Studio. You've probably heard of that, and there's been a bunch of that in the market, like Crew AI. There's Agent Ops and various things around low-code, Relevance AI. All of those things are basically contributing to this agent's population, if you will, right? So that's going to be interesting, and at the same time, it's funny when we talk about this about 10, 15 years ago, when we talk about the proliferation of VMs. You can sort of draw a bit of a parallel, very, very roughly, where you have people are moving from mainframe and then to server, and then now to VMs, and then now containers and various things like that. So agents are very, very loose aspect in that you will get a sprawl of agents, right? There's a bunch of companies that are doing it, not only Microsoft but also other companies. So we need that control, and that's why we come up with standards that we adopted, right? So Google, for example, came up with A2A, agent to agent protocol, as well as MCP, which I'm going to talk a little bit shortly, where you can give agents superpowers to be able to adopt tooling within their thing, and also resources and prompts as well. And predictability, again, we talk about that. So we want to make sure that when you go and ask agent to do certain things, that it does that reliably. So that's basically kind of the three key challenges that we try to solve in this whole process and agent framework. And there's a bunch of other frameworks as well available, but I'm going to focus a little bit on the semantic kernel and how you can solve that problem. So within XK, there are two kind of frameworks, if you will, within semantic kernel that alleviates and try to solve that problem. So one is a process framework, So as you can see here, basically ability for you to do like a filling form type situation, a wizard type situation,
Wizard. Yeah.
and use agent to kind of help solve that problem. So you infuse agent into a process, and every step you can have a specialized agent that does certain things, right? So for example, if you want to buy something, order something, you might want to go to a specialist agent that specializes in TV, or a specialist agent that specializes in washing machine, whatever it is, and that agent, it has specific tooling, and then you basically embed that into a step, as you can see here. And then and with any process, there's always complication, or not complexity, right? So there will be a process where you need to collect information from different sources, right? If I have to kind of put an example, it's like, when you onboard new staff in the company, you need to talk to HR system to get the record. You need to get payroll information as well, potentially from different system. And at some point, everything will converge, and then it will, basically get all this information put together, and then send that final confirmation that that employee is onboarded after you collected those information. So that's basically the fan out, fan in type approach available that we can use in Semantic Kernel. Process Framework allows you to do that. And there's also human in the loop, there's cycle. So all of those things are effectively different patterns that you can use, like hey, you need someone to approve things manually, and then it will listen to a particular signal and say approved, and then move on to the next step. But it knows the state that you're in, without you kind of telling the agent, because it knows that you're currently on step, say in this case step 4B. I need approval from someone. Then that is basically the step that it will go back to in that. And it can also do a loop as well. So we call it like cycle. So later on, I'll show you a quick example in my little project that gives you ability for you to review a draft of certain things, right? Or if you wanted to publish a new article or something, it might actually, you might want to use different agents to improve it as you go along. So maybe you might want to start with local agent, and then after that, local LLM, sorry, and then you might want to add hosted model or cloud model. So that's basically what we can do there. Any questions so far? Any thoughts from anyone in the community? No questions?
No, not at the moment. Carry on. People are interested.
Awesome. Thank you. So yes, so basically this SemantiClip, which is a project that I built, is really to demonstrate that. And it is quite simple. However, it hopefully demonstrates the ability for you to use or orchestrate your model in such a flexible way, right? And process and agent and so on. And I forgot to kind of mention a little bit about the agent, but the agent framework allows you to, effectively, declaratively state which agent that you want to use. So, for example, if you want to use offering from Foundry, we do have Foundry Agent Service that's recently renamed, as well as if you want to use different framework that is supported by Semantic Kernel, for example, Crew AI, or maybe I don't know whether they support that. I'll need to double check. Or maybe from Anthropic, or maybe from OpenAI agent framework, that you can actually just have a one-stop shop in Semantic Kernel that are able to access those agents. So you can configure the tools, you can configure the system prompts, you can configure the instructions, as well as obviously with MCP, you can add that export that as plugin. So that's basically what it does. And this process here, as you can see, it's quite simple. So I have this basically a block publishing service, if you will. So you have existing video, and that's exactly what I do. I'm actually program managing kind of a series. If you want to check it out, AK.MS Asia AC Security. So it's basically a series about security for software companies. And what I do is basically we record the episode, and then we publish obviously the video and so on. And also we convert that from the transcript into a blog post. So it's basically come up with a writing version, written version of a video. And it's as simple as that in a way that this agentic AI can be extrapolated to more complex process, right? So we start with, in this case, prepare video step, basically just grab a video path, right? So path of video, so whether that could be MP4 or whatever, and then it then transcribe the video. So first, this uses Whisper model, which will transcribe the audio into text. And also then you have generation of the blog. So this is going to be the first draft that I'm talking about, right? So when you want to generate the blog, you have the option with Agent Framework. You can use local model. You can also use cloud hosted model, like OpenAI, Azure OpenAI, and so on, right? So with this, with SemantiClip, you can flexibly say that, okay, I'm going to use Olano in this case. Just use 5.4 mini. In fact, it's only 2 gig. I'll show you shortly. And you want to, before you publish the first draft or the final draft, you can then pass it on to evaluate blog post step, which basically looking at the first draft and try to refine that. And come up with the the final draft of that. And I can simply add like another process here, which I didn't demo in this, is that you can add an approval step to say, hey, I'm happy with this, let's just publish it. I've kind of simulated it in the demo, but you'll see that. And this is what the MCP is. So let me just show you the idea of MCP. Let's see if I can just move on. Cool. So the model context protocol, in this case, so probably, I don't know if everyone here are familiar with that concept. Effectively, it's almost like giving ability for agents to access different tooling. What I meant by that is like, if you think about devices that you plug into your PCs before USB, how hard it is for you to do and install using different ports, right? So you have, I don't know if you old enough, use like serial adapter or maybe different inputs, floppy disks or whatever it is, right? That basically going to be somewhat MCP is basically attempting to standardize all of those connections. So as you can see, in this case I've got GitHub, but it can be any other provider that supports MCP. So if you think of it, where I want to publish something, right? So I need to publish the blog post to somewhere. I can just easily add a different system in here. So in this case, I can go, publish it to WordPress, or I can publish it to Ghost CMS or whatever it is that you have in mind. And the good thing about this is that it changes the whole game of building a very unique API to API sort of integration. You change that game to be more, on the provider side, in this case, GitHub, WordPress, and Ghost, they basically maintain the capability. So each of these providers has ability to expose different capabilities, right? So for example, in GitHub might be commit your code to GitHub, or find the latest pull request, or whatever it is, right? And WordPress, it might be, at least the blog post that I have published, or it might be, publish my blog post and then push it to live, and so on. And then same thing with Ghost. All of these capabilities are then maintained by the providers. So, remember, when you need to do REST APIs on all of those different providers, it's such a complex thing, right, for you to navigate. So it's almost like universally making it a lot easier for not only LLM, but also like the providers to basically expose their capabilities to the users, or to the client in this case, right? So it's like, as you can see here, it's very much basic example, but you can expose not only tooling, right? In this case, I demonstrated tooling. You can also expose prompts as well, right? So it could be, for example, tooling is obviously this old GitHub, WordPress and everything else. But resources can be, it could be your video files, or generated transcripts, or existing blog posts that you can put inside of the resources. So it's going to make it easy for agents to access and work with those different types of content, right? And then the prompts, these are kind of reusable templates, right? So you think of it like, instead of writing complex instructions every time, MCP prompts provide that consistent and tested ways to communicate tasks. So for example, I want to say, format this content as markdown and commit it to the specified repo with a given message. So that could be a prompt, right, that you can expose in your MCP server. That way everyone can use that predefined prompts for their application.
To decrease the complexity, right, or the number of lines of your system prompts. I think that's very interesting use case.
Yeah. So if you think about it, it's almost like, it's a universal adapter for LLM or AI, no matter what platform you have. So whether that's, in this case, SemantiClip, but it can also be VS Code, it can be Slack, it can be, Teams, so long as they support the clients, right? I don't know, I need to double check on the support for those clients, but really the idea is that it makes things a lot easier and reduce the development time with regards to integrating these tools. And it's different from kind of, I mean, people say it's almost like REST API. It's, in my opinion, it's different, because REST API is created for purposes other than, before LLM, right? So if you think about REST API, if you open up GitHub REST APIs now, there will be thousands and thousands of probably connections or endpoints. Whereas with LLM, you want to abstract all of those complexity and making it easier to understand for LLM to look into. And there's a bunch of stuff that we announced recently with Semantic Kernel, where they talk about you got all of these tools. How do you actually choose the right tools, right? And there's some announcements around that, where you can do orchestration around tooling. But just like plugins, if you've heard of plugins before in Semantic Kernel, you need to come up with a really good description of your tools, right? So with GitHub. There's this bunch of stuff there. So I mean, that's it. I'm gonna move on to the demo, unless there's any questions.
Nope, just a question from me. Like, so around those plugins, even with those agents, are there limits on the number of plugins that you can leverage?
Limits as in like number of plugins that you can.
Yeah, but what I've heard is that like because you have this sort of, it's a tooling that you're providing to the LLM.
Yeah.
Depending on the number, I think like they don't become that efficient, or the LLM, if you have like a certain number or a threshold, I don't know if there's a threshold, but if you have too many of those, I think they are not that great.
Yeah, I haven't heard of that. Particular X number of that you can adopt or integrate with your agent, the MCP tools or MCP server that you can integrate. But just like if you think about it, just like context with LLM, the more you provide, the likelihood that it becomes less accurate with its kind of output, right? And the same thing with tools. And in fact, the opposite is true. Right? The more specific your context is, the better the output is, right? And same thing with tools, in that you want to ensure that your tooling is well defined, obviously, and then also you be specific on what tools you use, and having that description of your tool, the schema, obviously, the handler function within MCP is important, and that spec is continually being improved. There's a lot of criticism around MCP because how simple it is, where it doesn't have kind of the bloat of all the security authentication mechanisms and so on. But that's being added as we go. So it's so there's no limit as far as I'm aware. However, be aware, and again with testing, make sure that you understand the output and the accuracy of the output before you kind of deploy many tools. Yeah. Cool. So with that, I'm gonna just share. Thanks for the question. Share my screen. Just stop screen. Gonna add. I might go entire screen this time. We'll see if this works. Alrighty. So what I have is simple, right? So again, let me just get this application going, and this is the web app. I'm going to upload a video right within here. This will be a short MP4 file, and then I'm going to process the video. And what this does effectively is just following that bouncing ball in the process box that I showed earlier, where it will transcribe convert it into audio, and then transcribe it into text using Whisper, and it uses local model, in this case Llama 5.4 mini, and within my local machine. I'll show you that as well. Within here, so basically this Llama is there, right? So let's see, show. So I've got two models here. I don't know whether you can see it properly.
Can you zoom in? Yeah.
So this one here, 5.4 mini latest, and then Llama. I'm just going to show. See if I can do that. There you go. So this is based on 5.3 architecture, 3.8 billion thing, and parameters, and it's about 2.5 gigs. So it's very small, and you can download it in there, so easy. And that's what I did for the initial draft. So this is what it produces, right? So the transcript is there. This is based on a very short video, which is about maybe even a couple of minutes. And then you have the blog post, which is, the converting this into a blog post and with a set of instructions. And within here, you can see, it's quite interesting, right? I mean, it does more than what this transcript provides you. There's only a few words in here, but you convert it into a blog post. It does save you time, right? If you think about it, you can kind of obviously have like tons and tons of transcripts in this, and then depending on the instructions that you provide, you want to limit it to like 3,000 characters or whatever, right? So you can do that with LLM, and within here, you can then have ability to use MCP to publish that to GitHub. Basically, just doing commit of this whole blog post, right? So this whole blog post here, I'm happy with it. In a way, it's kind of the approval process, if you will. But you can also process video again to basically say, hey, come up with a different blog post. It always comes up with a different one until you're happy with it, and then you can just do that. So you can just go and click submit with MCP, which effectively, use MCP in the backend, which I'll show you shortly. The piece of code in there does the preparation to publish the blog post. Again, this is a client, and then I use npx, which I'm going to show you quickly, which effectively hosts the server and the client together as a process inside of this Semantic Kernel project. So that's publish. So let me just open up this URL here, right? Hopefully, just say final note. Just remember that they got QR code for feedback, right? So just go do that. And there you go. So, so the QR code for feedback, final note, we got that. So basically, I'm not lying. Yeah, it's there, it's working. It is not a smoke and mirrors, and it's now as well. So you can see that it's committed straight to GitHub process. And that's basically uses MCP for that. So I've got a repo that I have GitHub access token, personal access token in. Probably not the most secure way, but there's authentication mechanism that you can actually embed inside MCP as well. But this gives you ability to, just making it easier for you to just integrate your application. If you think about it, you can do, various REST API integration, but with MCP, I can just do instructions, have multiple lines of code that will just does the integration to GitHub, and it will, integrate that to systems. So that's that. Not really mind blowing, but as you can see, all of this stuff can be extrapolated to your scenarios, right? So if you have application that you want to integrate, this is more a client scenario where I'm actually using an existing server. But if you want to build your own server, absolutely you can, right? And making it available as part of your as part of your offering, whatever it is, right? And in fact, we just announced, natural language web at Microsoft, where we give kind of a set of tooling for any website owners out there that wanting to use their website to be easily discoverable with MCP. So if you think about currently how we do indexing of websites, is that everything is indexed by either Google or Bing, right? And it's very expensive. It's centralized, whereas with this natural language web, it's basically democratizing access, so anyone and anything can be then be published. So all of this decentralizing the index to everyone, and it's resulting in a more accessible, hopefully accessible web. So yeah, have a look at that NL web if you haven't checked it out. But yeah, so I'm gonna share the just go through the code here. Let me just probably just need to get rid of that in the recording. Maybe I just shared the secret, but anyway, that's fine. I'm gonna get rid of the thing.
All right.
Yeah.
If you can zoom in, well, I don't think like people are going to be able to see it because like it's so tiny. But yeah.
Yeah. All good. I can easily redo that and delete it afterwards. Yeah. So regardless of what we're talking about here, so basically the main configuration or the main service in the code. Let me just zoom that again. I think there is a nice little presentation thing that one of our friends, Will, actually mentioned. I'm going to try that out. Let me just get this video processing service first. Is this the one? Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. Basically, the main code is in this, or the main kind of logic of the application. Obviously, you got the UI, you got the app, API, right? And then you got the service, just clean architecture type model. So in this case, basically you create the kernel as usual in Semantic Kernel. And I can see, as you can see here, I've got two options here, right? So you can use local SLM for your agent, or you can use Azure OpenAI for this. So you have full flexibility as to which one that you want to use, right? And the good thing about it is that it's totally up to you. If you feel like you want to use your hosted model, you can do that as well. So long as we have support for that within SK. In this case, the local SLM endpoints basically point to my local host. So you saw that before, the Olama 5.4 mini. And you also have, the Whisper model. So I've got the Whisper model, which is for audio to text conversion. And then in the last thing that I do, kind of the evaluation, I use the LLM, right? I use GPT-4o for that to give me the final draft of the agent. And finally, in the MCP configuration, I do have GitHub Personal Access Token, where you can actually put in your GitHub Personal Access Token in the file in the app dev app settings JSON. So yeah, so that's pretty much the main thing there. And the next thing that I also want to highlight here is that you've got ability to create a process, right? So you have this create a new semantic kernel process where you basically create that video processing workflow. I call that. It can be any name, and then you have multiple steps that you can then build and orchestrate, right? So you have prepare video step, transcribe video step, and then generate blog post step and evaluate blog post step. On each of these steps, it has detailed processes or detailed steps on how you do it, and you can see, for example, the prepare video step. It will just be grabbing the path of the video, and it's basically just a bunch of code that's related to that. And the transcribe video step basically uses the Whisper model. So convert using FFmpeg in this case, and then use Whisper to convert it to from audio to text, and then finally use the generate blog post step, which will do all the initial draft using local model as you saw earlier. And finally, is evaluate blog post step, which will use the LLM in AI Agent Service. So that's something that I wanted to show as well. So yeah, so that's basically the thing. And then you can see, you can then orchestrate the process. You start with the input event of start, can be any name really. And then you can then send the event as you go along, right? So you go to the next step. Once you finish this, you firstly kick off the prepare video step, and then after that, on function result means that basically as soon as you get the result, right? So you will send that through the transcribe video step, and then you pass in the parameter of the video path, which is coming off of the previous step, which is this step here, right? The prepare video step. You expect that there's a video path in there. And then you have the transcribe video step, which is where you pass in also the parameter called transcript. So this one here, as you see, the transcribe video step actually produces the transcript. And that transcript then is sent to a generate blog post step. So I send that to my LLM, to SLM, sorry, and then it will create the first draft. And then once I'm finished with that, then it moves to the next step, which is the evaluate blog post step, which is using LLM. So that's pretty much kind of the crux of the process, right? So you build the process, and then you execute the workflow, right? To send the data, which is the event, which is start, or it can be anything really. So you can have the start here, right? So that's the same. And then you pass in the data of requests, which is the first request data that's coming off of the controller. So you have the path, you have the video path, right? The video file in there, as you saw in the UI. And then once we finish with this, once we finish the process, we basically go and grab the evaluate blog post step, right? So basically what we want to do is to get the result of the final blog post, which is the evaluate blog post step, and return that object back to the UI, right? Back to the API and then the UI. And you saw that the blog was being rendered in there. And that's basically the part of the blog post generation, right? And then let me see if I can get exit presentation mode. Now I'm going to go and look at the blog post publishing, right? So the blog post publishing is quite similar in that just go and do appearance. So in this case, it's the publishing process. So basically, as soon as you click that button, right? So the submit with MCP, this will kick off a process called public blog post step, and then the publish blog post step kicks off the function called publish blog post, the kernel function in semantic kernel, and then you pass in the request, which is the actual content of the markdown, and you pass that on to MCP to publish that. Oh, no. Yeah, via MCP to GitHub.
So you have a plugin for that?
Yes. Yeah. Glad you asked that. So let me just have a look and show you the steps. The publish blog post step is here, right? So just go view appearance. I'm going to write a blog post on this. Hopefully you can use the agent to scan the code and create a blog post for me. It'll be nice.
Very nice.
Yes. So this one here is the publish blog post step. So the good thing about semantic kernel is that if you want to, the process framework and the agent framework and the kernel functionality, just like having kernel function ability for you to expose all of that, and the plugins, all that still working normally, as in like you can reuse your current plugins, if you will, and then just add them in to process framework or agent framework, right? So in this case, right, I have basically establish create agent with plugin. So this is a method. And then I get create a kernel and register the MCP tools as kernel functions. So it can and basically just kind of loosely speaking, it's representing the MCP tools as a kernel function, right? That you can use and as a plugin, basically. You can, as you know, plugin can contain multiple functions and so on, right? You can basically do similar thing with MCP tools, and get a list of functions, and then a list of tools from MCP, in this case GitHub server, and then you can expose them as functions within this. So I can probably, I don't know if you have time, I can probably run it and basically just do a quick debug or something. But you feel free to play around with this. Just get that in place. And this is basically the first one, right? So this is you basically add a plugin from the MCP tools that you have. In this case, GitHub, right? The plugin name is called GitHub, and then within that you have a bunch of functions. So like list commits, or list PR, or commit, obviously commit file. All of those things are just functions in Semantic Kernel, in the kernel. And then within here, I've got a plugin as well that I created that will provide the instructions of the of the commit file, or basically trying to do commits, basically providing the instructions of that to our kernel, so that it can integrate or interact with GitHub, basically. Let me just show you that. Let me just go back to plugins. And I think this one here. So in this case, right, so I have a plugin that just say, publish the blog post to GitHub using model console client with GitHub as server. I mean, you can improve it and so on. And then you provide the function, in this case, you provide the function of the publish plugin, and publish the blog post as this, and this is the blog post that you're expecting. And you add the system message, right? So, just like you are a coordinator for a blog post, and then you will receive a blog post, you need to publish it to GitHub. And publish this blog post, blah, blah, blah. That is effectively the plugin that I added in there, and then it will, log the information about, hey, as soon as I finish with that publishing process, then it will publish the blog post. And yeah, that's pretty much the two aspects of the the code of, and how you integrate MCP into Semantic Kernel, and how you can then use MCP to integrate with different systems, right? So in this case, GitHub. And then I can also show you the publishing service here. So this is the NPX bit, which I'm going to show you. Which one was it? Is it this one? No, I already showed you before in the actual. I mean, not this one. Sorry.
I think you're starting, and then I stopped you and asked about the plugin.
Oh yeah, sure. Go ahead.
No. I think you were there, right? So you're just showing about the blog post, the publisher, I guess. And then
yes. Yes.
Okay, so you're using like a plugin, and then you jump to the plugin. If you want to come back to that, all good.
Oh yeah. I was just gonna say, the actual integration with the blog posts, which is the publishing of blog posts. In this case, is the GitHub integration. So this one here, get MCP client. So this is basically, just to demystify that, right? So MCP supports at the moment 2 protocols. So you either use Studio, standard IO, or you use SSE, server side event, if I'm not mistaken. And in this case, I use Studio because GitHub supports that. And you can use NPX. In this case, it's basically ability for you to execute a package, and that package can then you execute that a Node.js package, and then you specify the arguments of model context protocol server GitHub, And this is where you specify your PAT, your personal access token. In this case, I use MCP sort of, I use config in my configuration file that you can just pass in to that. And then this will then return the MCP client, and then the MCP client can then be used by these tools here, right? So MCP client, you get the MCP client, and then you get the tools. So GitHub server will have a list of tools. And you're probably wondering why the server isn't running. Like you usually have to kind of install, host a server or a Docker or anything like that. Yeah. Which, with any MCP, if you want to use it, not only you need to have a client, but you also need to have a server before you can access the services. In this case, it's all done as part of that NPX. So NPX kind of runs the server in the process in memory, and then it will act as that server. So that's pretty much kind of the main nuggets of MCP. Cool. I'll probably stop there. I don't know if there's any questions around anything else that anyone want to talk about. And again, this is just the basics and it's getting started. There's a bunch of stuff around MCP that you can take a look at. And yeah, absolutely. It's an ongoing learning as for everyone, because the specs are currently being improved. There's a bunch of PRs in there. Take a look at more context protocol, the specs, but it's very fascinating to see. Because if you remember, like HTTP was very, very basic, and then you've got lots and lots of improvements to it, and then becoming a bit bloaty. In a way, it's almost like a bit of a deja vu with MCP, in my opinion. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's mainly like driven by the clients, right? So the clients, I think like some smarts, like around the authentication or those guardrails are just being implemented at the moment. I've been playing with GitHub Copilot, and yeah, just by leveraging that sort of studio, right? So yeah, that works well, right? But I like what you did, like on the codes with NPX, because well, you don't need to have a separate server running. You simply invoke that and make use of that. So that's pretty neat. I just put in the link to your repository, SemantiClip.
Yeah.
GitHub.com, vicperdana/SemantiClip, for others to jump to that and leverage your repository or explore, right? And get to learn. Like, it's a simple but like powerful example, because you see like those crazy complex examples, but what you bring in there is just like a useful use case, and you have split into different concerns. And yeah, I like it. To be honest, I explored your solution the week before, a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
Because I was exploring the Semantic Kernel process framework. So they're like, oh yeah, I'll take like what Vic has created. So
yeah, thank you. And that's really, grounding it to kind of the real example is the best way to do it. And you don't need to build the most complex thing initially. Start with something that you can relate, and just go from there. And just to let you know that process framework is still I believe it's still in experimental at the moment. So the team is looking for feedback. So if you have any feedback on that, you can go probably paste in the link as well. There's a semantic kernel discussion as well, where you can ask any questions, and also you can provide suggestions in there. If you go to semantic kernel repo, there's discussion tab in there, and then you can ask any questions in there. And it's a bunch of people asking interesting stuff around what they want to do with that. But yeah, definitely take a look at that, as well as the build event that just recently posted. I think Sean did an amazing session, and in fact, the SemantiClip was like sort of adapted to that, where he actually showed how he can convert podcasts into blog posts. Oh, not a summary. Sorry, a summary. So Scott Hanselman podcasts, and then convert it into a summary in written form. So it's quite similar in a way. So yeah, I mean, there's also a bunch of announcements around Foundry, and Foundry is very, very interesting. The integration now with Semantic Kernel, where you can have workflow, right? So the workflow is like a UI kind of driven form where you can look at how you orchestrate your agents, and that's going to be powerful. Yeah, for a lot of people when they adopt it. I believe I don't know whether it's in preview. I believe it's in preview, but yeah, double check on that. It's called, I don't know what's called, workflow or something. Again, I haven't actually played around that heavily because there's a bunch of announcements there that are so interesting.
Yeah, from last week, right? So there are a bunch of news. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, that's yeah. I'm still exploring. Basically, also checking the Azure AI Foundry Agent Service as well, because I think like of those the service that just went GA last week, and I think that it seems like promising, to be honest. Even like with the experience, users come to the platform and chatting to an agent, right? That leverage that sort of the knowledge of the conversations and those. It's interesting how those threads work behind the scenes. So yeah, I'm just mentioning because what I've done there, like you put like everything in codes. I think like what the AI agent service does, just to simplify kind of like that sort of model, right? So
100%,
yeah.
100%. So yeah, I mean, I think there was a really nice slide around that where summarizes how you can build agents at Microsoft. One is using Semantic Kernel, which basically fully custom code in a way, pro code, and we call it IS. So you need to manage the agent yourself, as in like you need to maintain the state, you need to manage the monitoring operations aspect. So we call it IS. And then the past version is basically uses the AI Agent Service, or now it's called Foundry Agent Service. And that basically, you can create an agent, but it basically just like app service, right? If you use app service, you don't need to host your own IS, for example, or your web server, whatever it is. And then basically you then manage to get agent to be hosted and maintained by Microsoft for that. Monitoring, if you want to look at the Azure interactions, the history of that, it's all maintained there. And then finally, you have the low code or the SaaS version of it, which is the Copilot Studio, where if you have kind of business processes that you want to use, and in a way it's quite constrained, or maybe there's kind of integration points that you want to get it done quickly, and you don't want IT people involved or tech people involved, and this is, we call it citizen developers or whatever now the term is, and allow people to build agents themselves. And there's already tons and tons of agents, and it was estimated there will be like 1.3 billion or something by 2030 or something like that. It was insane amount. Yeah.
Well, things are growing so fast. It's interesting. Be exploring and learning, same as you, with the audience as well. So we're all interested about agents. So I'd like to thank you, Vic, just for making the time and being available and get to share with us. I didn't see like any sort of questions or any other suggestions, or out of my own interest, I just raised some questions. I think maybe they were useful to the audience. But yeah, thank you again. Appreciate like your time, and thanks for one more time. I think it's your second time here in the user group.
Absolutely, yeah. Very keen to join and involved, and thank you again for having me. Definitely, this is something that I enjoy very much. So yeah, thank you so much for getting me involved in the opportunity. Appreciate it, Marcel.
Nice, thank you. Yeah, and we're just finishing here. And to the audience, just keep in touch. Like on Meetup, we're going to have more sessions coming forwards. And if you are interested in presenting as well, please just come forward and ping me on the user group. Well, you're welcome to come and share. Yeah. Thank you. Have a great evening and talk to you guys soon.
Awesome. See you all.